A warm hello and big thank you for joining our Sunday workshop on behavior change and system change in the housing sector at the Degrowth conference. We, the session hosts, are going to talk today about different ways of a fair transition into a carbon-free world with a specific focus on the housing sector. You may ask yourself why. Household energy consumption steadily increases and with it also GHG emissions and CO2 levels. The energy demand is steadily growing and it is predicted to continue to increase in the near future. In 2016, the residential energy consumption amounted for 27% of the EU's final energy consumption, representing the second largest consuming sector after transport. The majority of energy consumed in the residential sector is used for space heating. Households are therefore considered an important target for policy agenda concerning energy issues, as mitigation of climate change cannot solely rely on technical advances. As we know that we harm the environment with our behaviors, and a lot of individuals would also say that they are concerned about the climate and they intend to be more environmentally friendly, but actually we cannot see that in the numbers. This is called the intention-behavior gap. Our behaviors are really hard to change, and within this short outline of the workshop, I will try to explain to you why. Today, we want to stipulate a critical discussion on the question, how can integrated housing policy bring about decarbonisation while enabling a fair and just access for all? There are various ways of tackling the problem, for instance through energy efficiency and retrofits, taxes or behavioral changes. Hi, by the way, I'm Kristina, a doctoral student at the University of Vienna in the field of sociology, and I'm going to give you a short workshop input and possible topics to think about. The project Balance deals with the intersection of climate and social policies in the building sector and touches upon the question of energy poverty. We analyzed these targets and the relevant policy documents and concluded that the two policy spheres are misaligned. One of the main targets is to increase the renovation rate in existing buildings to 2 to 3% until 2030. Austria is lagging behind. An actual renovation rate averaged just 0.8% between 2006 and 2016. The available subsidies usually are not used for energy-saving renovations, but for repairing derelict buildings, without an explicit focus on energy efficiency benefits. In our analysis, we found out that only building owners can apply for renovation subsidies, and that excludes energy-poor or low-income renters. Furthermore, subsidies reach mid to high-income homeowners who can afford upfront investments anyways. Connected to this is the circumstance that low-income households more often live in dwellings with housing faults, which leads to a disproportionate financial burden to spend on energy services. Buildings that are in need of a retrofit, actually. According to our EU Silk analysis, 15% of the households in Austria have either arrears on utility bills or have housing faults, which is also an indication of energy poverty. Energy efficiency activities are seen as a long-term solution to lower fuel poverty and GHG emissions. But they face several barriers, such as credit constraints, lack of information. I would like to point out two major problems. The first one is known as the landlord-tenant dilemma, which you can see in low tenants' acceptability of retrofitting activities and the wish to maintain the status quo, because of a fear of an increase of rent costs after the retrofit. The second problem is that energy use and demand models face the pressing problem that over the years their estimations revealed performance gaps. What does it mean? It's a mismatch between expected and actual energy consumption that has been up to even 300%. This gap is also known as the rebound effect. In recent years, research increased in interdisciplinary work of understanding household energy use that focused also on individual behavior to lower this gap. Building energy awareness is another official target by the Austrian government. It is pooled under the Klimaaktiv program, which coordinates awareness building schemes and reports also numbers of website visits, but it refrains from estimating is its actual impact on household energy consumption. We know actually from environmental behavior research that changing attitudes or increasing knowledge is often not causally related to change people's behavior to be more environmentally friendly. The other climate target of the phase out of oil heating systems starting from 2025 shall be done in a socially compatible manner, avoiding social hardship, but there is no agreement on how to specify or define social hardship. It's not obvious how this transition is planned to be done in a social and just fair way. Within the social targets, affordable housing has historically been implemented in the rental sector, but the current government has its focus on facilitating private ownership. We also analyzed more in detail renovation subsidies, rent regulation and tenant protection, and the main result is that energetically bad private rental housing is between 1945 and 1980, and it is not covered by rent regulation, nor it is addressed explicitly by building renovation subsidies. Moreover, this building segment does not regulate rents or provides renters protection after retrofits. In our EU Silk analysis shows 41% of energy-poor households live in buildings constructed in that period, and they do not benefit from rent regulations in the private rental market, so rents can randomly increase if there is a retrofit. In general, in our expert interviews, none of the interview key actors reports any current attempts and systematic coordination between climate and social policy and tackling energy poverty. So to sum up, there is a lack of transparency how to reach the climate and social targets in a just and fair way. In the project, we seek to understand how the integration of climate and social policy sphere or an integrated housing policy can contribute to a fair and just transition. And now, let me please bridge the gap to changing behavior and some recent results. Designing energy-efficient interventions to reduce household energy consumption requires an understanding of the explanatory factors of energy behaviors and also understanding how behavioral change may occur. Research too long focused on how behaviors occur. Here we see an illustrative example of the most used theory, the theory of planned behavior by Eisfeld. It is explained by positive attitudes towards heating less, for instance, social norms, so do your friends encourage you to turn off your heating when you leave the apartment, and perceived behavior control, so are you able to control how cold or warm it is in your apartment? This leads to intentions, and this in turn leads to the execution of the intended behavior. The dual process approach has explained that behaviors are guided by our automatic system, System 1, and by the reflective system, System 2. The two systems refer to different processes and ways of handling information and acting. System 1 is our intuition, and decisions are made fast, automatic, subconsciously, and with low demands on our cognitive capacity. System 1 guides large of our daily behaviors, while System 2 requires more mental effort, is slower, is deliberate. For instance, the decision to renovate. With reference to the theory of planned behavior, we can conclude that intentions often represent individuals' reflections of own behaviors based on System 2, whereas everyday behavior is mostly the result of known situations, routines and habits, using heuristics produced by System 1. We can conclude that our household behavior is habitual behavior. Would it all show that 88% of domestic behaviors are habits? Theory of planned behavior targets, although, changing behavior through altering System 2 and conceptualizes individual decisions as driven by cognitive processes. However, one of the limitations in the theory of planned behavior is that it neglects to account for System 1 behaviors. Although habits are quite beneficial to individuals, they constitute a main barrier to change behavior because old habits and routines first need to be broken before new ones can be established. Habits are triggered by environmental cues and stable contexts such as the apartment, the time of the day, particular moods, and the presence of partners. Research has found that informational strategies to change behavior are often ineffective when dealing with strong habits. If environmental cues are changed or disrupted, the occurrence of habits is minimized, and as a result, behavior becomes more intentional in the sense of theory of planned behavior, as presented here. This means that habits are hard to perform when the context is destabilized. At this point, information-based intervention strategies become more effective in guiding behavior. So the success of intervention strategies depend largely on the degree how they are aligned with existing habits. The take-home message is that the better an intervention targets a habit, the more effective it is. The findings suggest that the focus of energy conservation policy should shift from motivating households to save energy to altering the environment to facilitate environmental behavior, particularly in such a way that energy-saving habits are fostered. For a large part, current energy and climate policies consist of soft policy measures, as for instance the Klimaaktiv program, which aims to elicit behavior change by means of information and persuasion. The current findings indicate that this is unlikely for daily energy behavior. This result helps to explain why the introduction of incentives has not always resulted in significant reductions of domestic energy use. Maybe a better approach for energy conservation policy might be to take habitual aspects of energy behavior into consideration in the design of interventions, as energy efficiency interventions, like a retrofit, offer so-called window of opportunities to change effectively behavior as habits are disrupted. Other window of opportunities are moving to new homes, childbirth, or retirement. Energy justice approach could bridge the gap to a fair and just transition. There's not enough time to dive into the energy justice literature, but in all these aspects, it is important to acknowledge and keep in mind recognition, distributional and procedural justices in a fair transition, and the different needs of occupants and vulnerable groups like old-aged, single mothers or severely sick in the energy debates. So this was a short input to get you into the topic of retrofitting and behavioral change and to stipulate also critical discussion. Thank you for your attention.
The workshop goal is to talk about strategic solutions for a decarbonized and socially just housing sector. We will, depending on the number of participants, develop 3 breakout rooms on fair carbon taxes, retrofitting schemes and awareness building.